Welcome to Unbox Your World, the podcast where philosophy meets tech. In each episode, we're connecting the dots between philosophy, technology, society, science, and progressive thought. And together with brilliant minds across the world who dare to challenge the way we think and live in today's society, we are unboxing our minds one episode at a time. I am Maria Salting. I am a tech professional during the day and a philosopher at night. So let's get started. Let's unbox ourselves. Welcome to the show. And in today's episode, we have James Ehrlich on the show, and he is the founder of Regenerative Holding, which is a Stanford University spin-off company that he founded in 2016 to realize the future of living in so-called regenerative, resilient, and self-reliant neighborhoods. And regenerative living is essentially sustainability 2.0. So what we've done is that we've crossed the point where it is no longer relevant to sustain Mother Earth, because we need to do more. We need to restore and renew our planet. And that is really what regenerative living means. Restoring our planet one village at a time. And the regenerative design is a system thinking where our needs in society is built with nature and not against nature. So James Ehrlich is building a B2B SaaS tool to build regenerative villages, or so-called ecovillages, in a resource-efficient way. And essentially, he wants to become the Tesla for ecovillages, where you can get the latest ecovillage software upgrade in just one finger click. And James is also a faculty member at Singularity University and Stanford, and he is a senior fellow at NASA Ames Research Center, and he has also worked under the Obama administration, focusing on regenerative infrastructure. So this is in fact something that the president himself has invested in. He has also in his early years of his career worked as a lighting designer and director for musical artists, such as Tina Turner, Joe Jackson, and more. And that later brought him to a career in video game design, followed by a career in television, where he has in fact produced a TV series called The Organic Living and Hippie Gourmet. And that one has been watched by over 35 million homes per week. Also, just to add to the resume, he also co-authored a best-selling cooking book to accompany the TV series. So all of this background has, in the end, brought him to Stanford University in 2012, where he married the technology, nature, and storytelling into Regen Villages Research Initiative, which in 2016 became a global startup impact company founded in the Netherlands, but with subsidiaries in Sweden, UK, US, and Canada. And so in today's episode, we will hear more from him about this fascinating initiative, and we will learn also how we can live in tune with nature in a so-called regenerative villages. So I am excited to get started today. So hello, James Ehrlich, founder of Regen Villages.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Hur mår du over there?
Jag mår bra, tack.
So I'm excited to get started today. It's a very fascinating project or business that you are running. I think we will see more of this in the future for sure. So tell us a story. How did you end up doing what you're doing, and your story, and how you ended up in regenerative villages and eco villages?
Yeah, it's a long story that goes back to my childhood when I grew up actually in New York, in not an eco village, but in a very urban jungle. Concrete jungle of New York City and Manhattan and Long Island, and understood and appreciated, what cities are about and how vibrant and incredible and accessible, and all the culture and the food and everything. And at the same time, from a very young age, I could see, or I tried to understand how everything worked in a city like New York, because it just seemed very brittle to me. Like at any moment, something could break, and would break probably badly for a lot of people at once. So I had this sort of ingrained into me. But I started my journey actually. At a young age. I was precocious entrepreneurial person, and was always interested in the early computers and software and technology. But back then, it's not really where the girls were. So the girls were more interested in music and rock and roll. And so I actually became interested in lighting design, and was doing lighting for musical acts, in the New York area, and had learned, and taught myself this craft of lighting and lighting design. And basically what happened was that was also my further introduction back into computers and software, because a lot of the technologies that were happening, in terms of moving from the analog lighting systems into digital, were starting to be about programming and how you could program these systems. So, the apex of that late teen, early 20 career that I had, I was working for Tina Turner, Joe Jackson, David Crosby, Grateful Dead. I had done a lot of very big arena shows, very big acts, and it was wonderful. But I also felt like it wasn't. I could sense that there wasn't a future there in that for me, and overall, like touring lighting was a very difficult business to be in, as well as an ephemeral art form. When you pull the power out of the system, it's not like you're left with a sculpture or a painting, or a piece of architecture or whatever it is. It's gone. It's like it almost like it never existed. In any case,
it's in your memory.
It's a memory, but it was beautiful, and it was a wonderful experience in my early teens and into my 20s. But I received my undergraduate degree from New York University, and had really sort of moved more into software and technology. I moved out to Silicon Valley after I graduated. I moved to California and started a software company with some friends. That was actually north of the Golden Gate Bridge, in this beautiful location called Marin County. And we were doing tools and technology for George Lucas, for Industrial Light and Magic, which is this special effects studio for film and TV, and also doing video game design and development. And so I had this love for video games and love for technology around entertainment and storytelling. Sort of a progression, if you will, from the musical lighting background.
Yeah.
And at the same time, was living in this beautiful place in the countryside, just 15 minutes from the city, from San Francisco. But just over the bridge, it was basically horse country and cow country. And I was surrounded by these very small plot, organic, biodynamic family farms, and they were just growing this beautiful menu of delicious things, and I was frequently invited to these farm to table meals, and I began to realize that this was the best part of my week, or the best part of my month, or just like every time I was there with these people on these farms, I was feeling great. And I was trying to figure out, is it the nature? Is it the food? Is it the wine? Is it the conversation? And so I started to film, these stories of these family farmers. And it was a really beautiful moment, because it was at this time when Apple and FireWire and Final Cut Pro, in other words, I had everything I needed on my own computer to film and edit these stories. And so I started to film these stories of the family farmers, which then started to track where the food was going, to elder care, schools, child care, Waldorf schools. and also these restaurants and these chefs. And I started to realize, as looking at all this footage around food, that we had the substance of a television, cooking show. And I started to edit all these pieces together, and we did very grassroots. It was back in the early 2000, year 2000 was like public access television here in the U.S., which was, you had a chance of being maybe one of 30 channels where your show could be featured. And so we started doing that, very grassroots. And then we started to grow this following. It was kind of like Grateful Dead, kind of like following of our show. And because our show was called Organic Living, and we had a sister show called Hippie Gourmet, two different shows, but similar theme around cooking and food that was organic. And then something remarkable happened in the early 2000s, around 2004. We did a satellite feed to national public television. It's called PBS here in the U.S. And I was amazed because overnight we picked up 60 broadcast television stations for our TV series. And at the apex of our show, by the mid 2000s, we were reaching 35 million homes a week on national public television and commercial TV. And in 2007, I co-authored a best-selling companion cookbook on Hachette. But the stories were really more than just about the food, the farmers, the chefs, the recipes. I mean, of course, it was a cookbook, so it was mostly about that. But it had these other sidebar stories about communities, about passive housing, energy positive homes, electric vehicles, solar panels, wind, biodigestion. It had a lot of different pieces about living in these places. Anyway, long story short, when I had come to Stanford in 2012, I had this almost 15-year background in case study research of family farming and sustainability, regenerative resiliency at the local neighborhood scale. And I got involved at Stanford in a research initiative called the Solar Decathlon about who could build the most energy positive house. And I went to the professors early on and I said, it occurs to me that a smart house inside of a dumb neighborhood doesn't make a lot of sense. That we ought to be doing is creating the sentient neighborhood infrastructure that's critical life support systems around healthy food and clean water and clean energy and waste to resource management that then allows these smart homes to be sort of plopped in there. And then you really have safety. You have these places that can be safe. And I was really lucky because I managed to be with these few professors at Stanford who believe in something called design empathy, meaning that they were supportive of this idea, this bold ambition. And they said, this is great. You should really pursue this and ambitiously. So that was the beginning of the research initiative behind Regen Villages. And I decided to sort of self-fund a variety of these smaller project research pieces off of campus, but connected to Stanford. And then eventually in 2016, we decided to actually create the for-profit impact company called Regen Villages Holding, which is actually a Dutch holding company. So it's an EU entity. But we do have a Swedish AB. We have a Swedish subsidiary based in Malmo, and an office in London, a subsidiary here in the U.S., and most recently in British Columbia. And really the goal is for Regen Villages is this idea of a software-driven design and operation of creating these new build and retrofit neighborhoods around safety, around regenerative resiliency, which means that you have doorstep access to these things that you need, that your family needs, to survive and thrive and flourish. So thank you for my long-winded life story right there.
No, but it's super interesting. Because when you started doing the research at Stanford, it sounds like you were very much before your time. Like, was anyone else in the world doing this research, or like, was it fairly new?
No, that we had there's a rich history, cultural history in Europe for eco-villages, and and then there's this group called the Global Eco-Village Network, for instance, that's been around since the 70s, and there are examples of quote unquote successful eco-villages around the world. The thing is, they take a long time organically for these neighborhoods, communities to get built. It can take from 8 to 30 years to build a 100-home community. And I thought, well, can't we find a more, rapid solution, an industrialized prefab turnkey solution to designing these communities and getting the permits pulled quickly by government, leapfrogging community assessment, something that bogs down, of course, the Nordics, these egalitarian kind of communities, but also that we could create a network, digitally connected network of these communities around the world. So what we did was we stand on the shoulders of who've come before us. So it's not my idea. I'm really a vessel, okay, for this concept to come forward. But what we did do was take more of an Elon Musk perspective on the Buckminster Fuller concept of resource-driven maps and look at that through the lens of a Tesla model, right? Where you can build a neighborhood where when you wake up in the morning, you can imagine that the neighborhood has had a software upgrade because it's learned from other neighborhoods around the world in similar climate zones how to improve or mitigate. So that's what we really bring to the table is something new with Regen Villages.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. So before we dig into this further, could you simply define the term regenerative, like what that means? Is there a simple elevator sentence?
I like to say that the output of one system becomes the input of another. For instance, when you look at digesting organic food waste and animal waste, and you use these lovely creatures called black soldier fly larvae or aquatic worms, these creatures digest that waste and they love it. It's just their food. They eat their own weight every day in these things. And they become plump and delicious food then for chickens and fish. There's live natural food inputs for those chickens and fish. But moreover, that the process that the worms and the larvae use to digest the waste aerates soil and creates the circumstance for nutrient-rich, microbe-filled topsoil. So you take all of a sudden what was previously a waste product, organic food and waste and animal waste, and you convert that into food for chickens and fish and other small animals. You also convert that into topsoil, which is gold around the world. So that's an output of one system becoming the input of another, and thereby creating something that is regenerative. And when you have that, that can then be a restorative component.
Yeah.
And so we really look at that in the same way. For instance, when you build an energy positive house, it's a passive house technology, and you use what's called low bore geothermal. So basically, you just dig with a small rod. You go down, 10 to 25 meters, not even very far down into the earth. You get a constant temperature. Doesn't matter pretty much where you are around the world. You get a constant temperature at that depth. And then you do this sort of heat cooling exchange within those houses and the structure. And so again, it's sort of free energy, and we contribute that to that. So these are all of these other regenerative pieces. So I'm not sure that was the short elevator pitch for it, but essentially it's being able to use nature and natural processes to create flourishing and thriving abundance.
Could you say that instead of just sustaining, which is kind of what sustainability sounds like, you're making it even better and in tune with nature?
Well, sustainable, let's go back for a second. We had a chance at sustainability about 50, 60 years ago when the hippies were like, hey, we need clean air, we need clean water, we need to shut down these bad industries. And the concept of sustainability is to sustain, is to hold back, right? Somebody, joked, a year or two ago about being, using the word sustainability for a marriage. If someone said, if someone asked how your marriage is, and they said, sustainable, it doesn't sound very good. So it just means you're kind of like barely holding on, which is true. So we have to, I only use the word sustainable when it comes to business models. And this idea that we can actually create a new economy that does provide impact profit, but it's not greed profit. It's not extraction and predatory profit, right? Yep. So that's pretty much nowadays where I only use the word sustainable.
I think it's interesting the analogy used in I mean, when you're working out, you break down your muscles, and then they will become even stronger afterwards. That's kind of how nature works, right? Like nature is always progressing.
Nature is progressing and can be self-healing. At the same time, I like to say, if we can just take a half a step back towards Mother Earth, that she will literally throw her arms around us and nurture us. Okay. Yeah. But what we continue to do is imagine that mega cities and big ag somehow is the most sustainable, quote unquote, future, because it's sustainability by proximity. But there's a big issue with that, and this is the big issue that I have been on a soapbox about, which is that we are, as a species, the most disassociated from nature that we have ever been in our history as an animal, as a creature on planet Earth. So we must find a way back, a pathway to creating these lily pads of self-sustaining, regenerative, and resilient communities that that provide for the basic Maslow hierarchical needs of the people who live in those communities, in addition to providing a public goodwill radius around those neighborhoods, because they're going to be overproducing actually clean water, clean food, clean energy. That's really the way forward. So that's the way we envision the future.
So so now that the listeners should know a little bit more what the regenerative means, then do you want to tell us a little bit more about how a day in a regen village looks like?
Well, let me first start by saying that that 6 years ago, when the research at Stanford sort of started, maybe now close to 7 years ago, in earnest, there were many people, including esteemed colleagues on campus and others around the world, who thought that I was crazy, maybe nutty, a little zany, I don't know, wacky, because of this idea of imagining that the city, the trend to the cities, could somehow change, that people from all around the world would somehow not want to be like rushing to live in cities, and that at some point that people would want to like leave a city and go actually back towards the countryside. So, I tried to explain in the best way that I could that we see these climate change anomalies coming. We know that these things are going to be happening more and more around the world based on the IPCC data, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, based on the UN data, based on NASA data, ESA data, you name it. And to say that once a city starts to break in certain ways, in certain places, that all of a sudden you're going to start to see a wave of humanity wanting to go find safety, wanting to find place where they think they can get fed and hydrated and nurtured. So in any case, here we are in COVID, 8-9 months into COVID, and everything that we predicted about this exodus is now happening. Okay, those people with money, capable of leaving New York, Paris, London, you name the city, Mumbai, whatever, have left. They've gone to either their country house, their country estate, or they've bought houses in the country, or they've just they've fled, and so now we're at this place where you have a mass of humanity that doesn't have skills to live in the countryside. And you also have a countryside that's been neglected for decades from terms of resources and infrastructure. So I believe this is an opportunity, an exciting opportunity to rapidly deploy these turnkey neighborhood developments that can be nurturing for these communities. That's where we are right now in terms of positioning ourselves to sovereign wealth, pension fund, green transition funds, and most recently we became part of the UN Climate Change Secretariat Resilience Lab, and some very big announcements are going to be coming soon, from that as well. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's where
it's still super relevant and super interesting. So the way I interpret it is basically that what your software is doing is connecting intelligence from all those ecovillages across the world, and making them even more efficient when together. And then, like, how does it then look like to, like, if someone is interested in moving there, like how will that life be?
So let me again start from because I probably should have started from the beginning with this, but we have a Village OS, a village operating system software platform that we're continuing to develop and build out. And the main goals of the software are two primary areas. The first is as a design platform that it can actually design a self-sustaining, regenerative, and resilient neighborhood on previously zoned agricultural or ranch land or green space area, and as a mechanism to change the rules that this land can be developed for mixed use for housing and light commercial and community, but also that we can get the permits quicker and quickly to create these communities rapidly using prefab construction, earthen, mass timber, other kinds of building materials, so that these neighborhoods can go from approval, master plan approval, to move in less than a year, which is like light speed. You can imagine a neighborhood of 400 homes going up and that people can move in less than 12 months. That's amazing, but it's not against the laws of physics. It completely can happen. We've seen it happen actually in 6 or 8 months in certain places in the world. So that's the first part of the software. The second part of the software, once it's done designing those communities and creating the circumstance to get them built, it becomes the farmhouse server. It can actually run the regenerative neighborhood infrastructure. And then the goal with that is that the software can then communicate with other connected neighborhoods around the world, learn and improve or mitigate. So we're not against retrofits. We can take pieces of what we learn and what we design for those new build greenfield communities and bring them back to cities, bring some of those pieces back to urban areas. But it's not where we start. It's not where we want to start. We want to start urgently to get the peri-urban and rural areas set up for the next wave of exodus, which will come from megacities. This is our first taste of that exodus. We feel like it's going to happen again. And we're not saying that cities should empty out and be empty. We're saying that there needs to be a balance, that we are going to have 10 billion people on Earth, and we need to have a balance between these smart rural areas, connected, regenerative, resilient, and also and to connection to urban places. So that's but a day in the life of regen villages. Okay, so you wake up in the morning in this very toasty, beautiful, energy positive home that's made of earthen building material like mass timber, and smells good, it feels good, it's breathable, it's organic, and doesn't have chemicals or off gassing. You have these sort of ambient heated floors in parts of the world where that's really a lovely kind of feeling. So you can walk around barefoot in your house, even in the dead of winter, or in a tropical environment. The floor is cool, so you can again walk around barefoot because the house is quite temperate and lovely. The amenities in the home are connected and are there to serve you and your family in such a way, in terms of lighting, in terms of sound, in terms of appliances, that you just feel comfortable and taken care of. Then you can wander out of your house down a garden path where every square meter of available landmass that's open area is edible. Orchards, berms, guilds, swells, every kind of imaginable cultivation that can happen. You see sort of chickens and hens darting about. That the eggs are going to be fresh. That you can see, just on the gentle sloping hillside, a few cows wandering around, or sheep or goat. And again, for light dairy and for their aeration of the soil and their waste, which is part of the ecosystem. You walk past these beautiful vertical greenhouses that are architecturally what we call food cathedrals, that have fish and shrimp and crawfish and several species of delicious freshwater fish, and their waste is feeding the plants for nutrients and fertilizer, and it's all in this, again, regenerative circular ecosystem. And you make your way to the community center where there's a bakery, and you smell the fresh bread being baked, and you walk in and have a nice coffee, and there's the community people smiling and feeling excited because the fresh produce boxes are coming in now from the gardens and the farms for your family to collect, or to be delivered to your doorstep, and you're part of something. And then you walk through the community center to your shared office area and space. And as you're there having your coffee and your freshly baked bun, croissant, whatever it may be, you see your children walking through to the nursery school or to the school, which is right there, again, in the village community, in part of this thing. And that whatever your needs are in terms of light clinical healthcare, dental, beauty, whatever it is, kind of spa-like setting, sauna, very important for the Nordics. You have to have the community sauna. And all of those things are there within walkable, bikeable, small electric vehicle access. There's no, the car culture is at the periphery. They have this idea of shared smart mobility, which can take you to high-speed transit or drone delivery or drone taxis to an urban area like Stockholm, for instance, or to Malmo or whatever it may be, or Copenhagen, across the water there. However it may be, but the main idea really is that you don't have to go to an urban place or to an office. You can live and work and be educated and be part of a community. And then moreover, at the center in the community center square, in the piazza area, is a place for education, for curriculum, for maker movement, DIY projects, cultural events, theatrical events, musical events, a place to learn to cook and to create recipes, where people from all different walks of life, different socioeconomic, cultural, ethnic backgrounds can come together and become best of friends, even if you don't speak the same language, all around food. This is what we believe is the main driving force. So that's a kind of a day in the life of living in a regen village. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, and it's really about just happiness, calm life.
I'm able to tell your TV storytelling skills from it was very, very selling and nice description. I can picture myself in that village while you were talking.
I appreciate this so much, because honestly, the last few years especially, I've been, my job has really been relegated to fundraising and dealing with investors and dealing with in terms of real estate development and all of this different sort of spreadsheets and it really extracts the passion. Unfortunately, it takes away from this ability to stop and remember what it is that really drew me in the first place towards this vision. Which really is about the best parts of our life. If you stop and think about it, the best moments in your life really are these meals with friends and family where you're just laughing until you cry or crying until you laugh and finding just where you can sit at a table and after you've had a delicious meal of organic, life-affirming ingredients sourced, right next to where you ate those ingredients, that you can think big thoughts about the world and about your community. And so, I'm grateful for this conversation because it reminds me of where I really want to focus and really want to be with Regen Villages.
Nice. Yeah, it definitely sounds tempting to move there. So I think so speaking of more serious topics, you have mentioned that you have worked with this under the Obama administration. That sounds pretty. I mean, it's interesting that that was prioritized from a political point of view. So I'd be super interested to hear, what you're able to share, like what you were doing, and why the Obama administration actually did decide to prioritize this.
Okay, well, let me just say that a few caveats with that I had joined a White House OSTP science office delegation, Joint Task Force on Regenerative Infrastructure, but it was in 2016, which was really, again, the end of the Obama administration, the beginning of the end of the Obama administration, and we had all had very high hopes of that this task force was going to go forth and really begin to implement essentially a green transition strategy across the U.S., especially in what are called opportunity zones. And these are places that have, really been, taken a terrible beating in terms of economic downturns. And so these were places that need to be rejuvenated, and you needed to create social affordable housing and all of these different kinds of things. So we got really excited and we started to move these things forward. It also included, I was also appointed to a Department of Energy roundtable on redefining a microgrid, which is typically related to power and energy, neighborhood scale power, but to redefine that to include food and water and circular waste systems. So it's a much broader interpretation of a grid, microgrid neighborhood scale infrastructure, especially for tribal lands. Now in the U.S., you've got these First Nations, indigenous culture that, and you just can't believe the living conditions they're in. It's not. You wouldn't even believe that you're living, that you're in the United States of America when you go to these places where people are living without clean water, power, living in very bad trailer, or pop-up kind of housing conditions, and terrible diets, and diabetes, and alcoholism, and all these different kinds of bad situations. So we were really looking at, hey, what can we do? Create new economic models, build new housing, design for extreme affordability, create these kinds of places rapidly. But then, of course, the administration changed, and we had hoped that this momentum would sort of continue, but it didn't, and it's been a really unfortunate moment for us, in terms of having to really see a great number of environmental milestones and protections completely taken out over the last 4 years. So yeah, I mean, we're hopeful that this week coming up we can see a new kind of administration that will be focusing a lot of resources towards a new industrial commitment. And to be perfectly honest, not just here in the US, but all around the world, we need a kind of depression logic, systemic funding programs for work related to programs related to green infrastructure, and that's,
you're talking about as in mental illness.
No, in terms of what COVID has caused around the world is a really a wake-up call to the fact that our extraction consumption economies, based on quarterly profits that have to keep going up and up and up, there's only one other organism that we know of that acts like that. It's called cancer. Okay, it's a cancer cell. Okay, because it keeps eating and it keeps growing, and it doesn't care about its host. So basically,
that's actually very good.
Yes. Yeah. So here we are now, coming, hopefully out of COVID. I don't know when, but at some point soon. And when that happens, we will need a new economic model that's going to be based on green infrastructure, new housing, on smart mobility, autonomous mobility, also new infrastructure on energy and waste mitigation, but also around organic food, hyperlocal, resilient, district scale, neighborhood scale production that creates safety. These are all safety measures that can be nurturing. So it also will be some combination of universal basic income, so a little bit of sprinkling in that. And we think between building the right neighborhoods that can be self-sustaining, that the amount of basic income that families will need, that delta is really reduced. Because if most of your needs are met, housing, food, water, energy, you throw in maybe Wi-Fi, espresso, I don't know, the new basic hierarchical needs, right? That the amount of actual UBI that you would need, universal basic income, can actually be much less. So, but moreover, that building these communities, it's not about communism or socialism or any of these isms. It's really about inspiring new economic models. Again, when you cover the basic needs and you're nurturing people, they have a path to think big thoughts and start to learn things and contribute. So in any case, that's that's our feeling about where we have to go economically on planet Earth, not just here in the U.S. Of course, we're praying that we can get a green transition facing government. It's really crazy to me that we're living on Earth with all of the understanding and all of the science, and viscerally seeing. I'm here in California, and we've lost 4.2 million acres in the last 2.5 months to forest fires. 4.2 million acres just in the state of California. And I can't go outside today because the air quality is bad. So the smoke and the fires are still lingering here. And the bottom line is, we live on this organism, this Mother Earth, and as Buckminster Fuller used to say, spaceship Earth, as if we're not in a capsule. Basically, we just continue to think that the resources are endless. And they're not. So we have to be regenerative and resilient. And that's really the goal of what we're up to here.
Yeah, nice. And it seems like you're not only inspiring, the politics. I see. Yeah, I don't know if it's the latest update now, but you have over 22,000 families that have registered to live in regen villages. So that's quite a lot of families that already want to move in. So, I mean, what do you see that, where is this traction coming from?
Well, we've been the media darling since 2016, when we first really announced Regen Villages as this Stanford spinoff company to imagine the future of living in these self-sustaining communities. And of course, it's like this high-tech concept that really got the imagination of these media sources, and big media sources, by the way, Forbes and Bloomberg News and New York Times and Habitat and all the big news sources out there, and that created this viral spread of the story. The World Economic Forum did a video. Now this did a video, and we've had probably 150 plus million web impressions, if not more. And 27,000 families now have pre-registered, and we have essentially created a demand for people who essentially looking for place. They're looking for they want to buy a house, or they want to rent a house. They want to be part of a community, but they want to be part of a community where the neighborhood amenities, the infrastructure, it's not just about a tennis court or a golf course or a pool, that the neighborhood infrastructure is actually about safety and resiliency and health and well-being and nurturing and compassion, and that it's multi-generational. And so, of course, we've got these, creative class, cultural creative seniors who do not want to downsize and move into, senior living or assisted living, because what is that? That's purgatory. That's ridiculous. They want to move into a community where there are babies running around. And it's perfect to have, nursery school and elder care combined. Okay. A lot of great research behind that, coming out of the Netherlands and in Sweden and other places. Right. But also families want to move there, of course, but young people want to move there because they want to live close to the land, and they want to feel like that their effort in a community will lead to a place where they can find the right mate and have children and have a long life. So that's what's drawing the people from around the world. In other words, people who live in a city environment, a lot of people dream about the countryside, but they're frightened because they don't have skills. They don't have farming, gardening skills. They don't have the skills to, maintain or take care of like an old house, or to deal with, or to worry about, being distant from the city for whatever reason, for all the different reasons. But when you can create a hamlet, a classic European village scenario of beautiful, Scandinavian design, architectural aesthetic with these beautiful, mass timber, components, and it's just glass and wood, and it glows and warmly in the winter, and it's just beautiful in the spring and the summer, and all of those different aspects. And it's all about carving out the waterways and creating places for kayaking or sailing or swimming, whatever it may be, and you just have this places where people feel safe and nurtured. Then all of a sudden you've got this turnkey scenario where you don't have to be a farmer, you don't have to be an engineer, you don't have to be a general contractor, you don't have to be a handyman or woman. You can come to the community as you would any other subdivision, quote unquote, buy a house, rent a house, have social, affordable access to living in the community. That's very important for us. We're not looking for these gated communities of just wealthy people. It has to be about a mix. And the people who do have money and means have to be okay with living in a community with diverse socioeconomic and cultural and ethnic families. Okay,
so strong values, common ground there.
We're not socially engineering anything, but the bottom line is you're not going to move into regen villages if you're a racist. It's not going to work for you. Okay, it's not a good place, because we're going to have lots of families with lots of backgrounds. However, if you've had some background in that, and you want to free yourself of that, regen villages is a perfect and thankful place to live in, because then you have a chance to actually meet people from different culture and different backgrounds over food and breaking bread and laughter together. And all around the world, we have seen that the kitchen is the best place for brokering peaceful communities. That the kitchen and recipes and food allows people to sample flavors and tastes, and understanding is actually a basis of understanding is created around food. It's quite a phenomenon, but it's true. So that's how we roll. That's how we think about things. And of course, it's not for everybody. People who want to live in Manhattan and live in London and live in Paris, God bless them. They can. They live in the city. They want to live in 40, 50, 100-story apartment building. They can. I worry very much about them, because when the power goes out in a 100-floor building, that means your elevator doesn't work. And if the water goes out, well, then it means you have to figure out how to get water to your apartment, and etc. So that's kind of our thought process, and is finding a solution.
Yeah. So is it because you mentioned that you got a lot of media traction because of your technology company? So what are the typical people that have registered so far? Is it a lot of tech people, or is it professionals, or is it like all type of demographics? Or,
look, we've got these cultural creatives, creative class, senior folks. They don't want to buy one house from us; they want to buy 5 or 10. Because they want to buy a house for their kids and their grandkids and their friends and their family. They have a lot of money and they want to live in a community like this. So there's that end of the spectrum. And then we've got young people, millennials and younger, who
People like me.
exactly, who want very much to not only live in a regen village, but have a path to ownership. So maybe they'll come in through a social housing, kind of scheme, or social affordable housing scheme, and through your contributions to the community in terms of effort and labor and commitment, you can actually have a path to ownership. So what we've done is we look at the monthly association fee, what's called here in the U.S. a HOA fee, homeowners association fee, as a mechanism for creating a happy eco-village community. So basically, like I said, you don't have to be a farmer, you don't have to be an engineer, you don't have to do anything in a regen village if you don't want to. You would then pay a higher monthly association fee, and you would get your food and your water and your energy, and you would get, you'd get your sustenance from the community. You just pay a higher monthly fee. However, if you and your family members contribute and volunteer and participate in the community, we have these tasks, these ledgered tasks, that when they're completed, your family then, your monthly bill gets reduced because you've helped reduce those costs for the community. So basically, then your monthly either association fee goes down, or maybe your rent bill is reduced, or maybe your mortgage bill is reduced, and or maybe you come to the community with nothing, but you're able to get a social flat, and over a period of 20 years of commitment and effort in the community, you actually can get title on that flat. So it's a sweat equity kind of commitment.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah.
So in other words, we're trying to say, look, we want to be inclusive. We want to understand what's happening now because of COVID. The amount of jobs are just not going to be there anymore. And what's coming in right now, what you're seeing coming in rapidly, that's going to replace the current or previously employed people, will be robots, will be machine learning. And it's not just about assembly line workers or menial labor. It's about lawyers, doctors, professors, architects, engineers. Machine learning is going to start to replace a lot of jobs. And we have to be prepared to not take the best and the brightest and our populace overall and turn this into like a Matrix movie scenario, where we're like really working for the robots. We want to be able to live in these beautiful, flourishing places where, yes, the machine learning and the robotics are doing their part to support us and our thriving and our flourishing, but we have new opportunities. So it's to change the definition of work to self-worth.
Yeah.
That's really what we're talking about here. So there's a lot of broad pieces that can happen by living in a Regen Villages community. So
in a way, I guess it's changing the KPI and what you're optimizing towards in societies. And I guess that kind of like leads over to my next question, like what is the main challenges like to in society to put this into practice? Like
I like to say,
rules regulation. Yeah.
And I'd like to say it's not a matter of science, technology, or physics anymore. Okay, because people seem to think that all of a sudden that it's, oh my gosh, it's such a leap of faith. This is like some kind of Star Trek holodeck future. It sounds great, but it's not practical. And the truth of the matter is, it really isn't a matter of science, technology, or physics. In other words, all of these things exist right now. All of these pieces and components exist for us to create these beautiful, self-sustaining, safe and happy and healthy neighborhoods and communities. So what is the problem? What's the barrier? The barrier is really two things. It's money and political will. And the interesting thing is that when you have the money, typically, not always, but typically the political will gets a little bit easier. Because, of course, they see that there's industrial interest and support. They see that there is an economic basis, quote unquote, spreadsheets that make the government officials look good. If they change those rules, then okay, they know that they're not going to fail. This will be successful. So the money that's in place helps to make those politicians feel more comfortable to change the rules to make those things happen. I'll give you a perfect example from a Swedish perspective. In Sweden, you're a beautiful country, and I've been there 37, 38 times in the last 4 years, by the way. North, south, east, and west, from Luleå to Skurup, from Eslav to Gotland. I've been everywhere. And then,
you've seen more Sweden than I have.
Yeah, probably. But here's the thing. In Sweden, you need to build 1 million plus new homes in the next 8 to 10 years. And yet it takes, with the current rules and regulations, anywhere between 5 to 10 years to get permission and the ability to build for one community, maybe a few hundred homes. And Sweden also made some pretty big mistakes in the 1970s in terms of social housing and these housing blocks that, which I understood was, okay, we need housing desperately, but they didn't approach the neighborhood infrastructure and a path to ownership and a scenario where those neighborhoods could be improving actually over decades and not declining over decades. So Sweden is an example, a poster child of how our village operating system software can change the rules, create a new rule book for fast track permitting and permissioning and to run those communities, but also that we have to work with like Electa and SEB and the big constructors in Sweden, whether it's Skanska or what is it, NCA, etc. That they are engaged in this industrialized, scaled approach to new build developments, where 2/3 of the land grant, that's a big piece of land, is not going to be developed for housing, but actually will be, excuse me, it will be developed for critical life support systems that support that housing density, that new build density. So basically, park-like, bikeable, walkable, edible neighborhood infrastructure, water capture, energy generation, waste digestion, that supports several hundred new homes in those communities or several thousand new homes in those communities to make them safe and self-reliant. And so that's our goal, is to get to this industrialized scale so that a country like Sweden can have a new rule book that works for its citizens.
Nice. So wrapping up with the last question then, which is a nice segue into that. So you are actually now in the process of a Series A round of investment. So, I mean, what type of investors are you looking for, and what's your investor pitch? Like, well, why is this? Investors always care about the financials. So why is it a good product to invest in as well?
Right. So
apart from all the apart from all the good things as well.
Absolutely. The main thing really is this is an impact investment scenario. So we're talking about absolutely, beautiful kinds of healthy returns, but they're long-term returns. We're looking at long-term positive externality spreadsheets. And of course, we're striving for, let's say, a 12 to 15% iterated rate of return, or IRR, for each real estate development. So it's a reasonable double-digit profit, but it's not 25% with a 2-year exit. It's 10, 12%, 12 to 15, whatever percent, based on maybe a 5-year return or exit return for on the real estate side. On the software side, of course, it's more Silicon Valley, and this concept that as we build both the data repository and the algorithms to design and operate these neighborhoods, that there's potentially billions of euro value in a software platform that can heal and help planet Earth. Having our connection now to the UN Climate Change Secretariat, being part of the EU Smart Rural Villages Commission, which we've been now for the last 18 months plus, that there is a bigger meaning in terms of return on investment. So we're looking right now for 16 million euro for our Series A round. We're looking for the right investors. Okay, those are folks, the wealthy family offices, pension funds, sovereign wealth, but more than likely it would be at this stage private equity investors, wealthy real estate investors, tech investors, but folks who are ready right now to lean in on restoring and healing our mother, planet Earth, while also addressing critical housing shortages and economic inequality, and creating these self-sustaining, self-reliant communities that actually reduce burdens on government, local, regional, national, reduce burdens on healthcare systems. This is our main goal for Regen Villages, and that there is a impact investment return that will allow us to then connect directly to these big financial organizations, sovereign wealth, pension fund, green transition funds, EU regional structural funds, the like, and be able to have patient debt finance. So that we're really, at the end of the day, an incredibly sexy software company that has connection as a conduit to big finance. And then developers, landowners, government, communities, constructors all around the world will be vying for us to work with them. And so I like to use this metaphor as a mycelial network, a fungal network that's a beneficial long-term economic ledger, that we can inoculate ourselves into the previous industry of construction and real estate development, terrible greed and terrible polluting organizations, inoculate ourselves into their mindset with a new business model, a new economic model that they do understand, because it is about developing, but it's developing in the right way. And then we can see that these mushrooms or lily pads of neighborhoods get built rapidly around the world. And that's my definition of wealth, is this idea that hundreds of thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world can live happily, with great health and in peace in these communities that new economic models are beginning to sprout up. And we can be the cause of that through this mechanism. So that's our goal. So it's just, it's taking Greta to the next level.
Yeah, exactly.
We love you, Greta.
Fueling the movement.
We love you, Greta.
Yeah.
So
she's amazing. Great. This has been super fascinating, and it also brings me a lot of future hope. So I am excited to follow this. Is there anything else you would like to share before we wrap up the show? How to get in touch with you, how to sign up, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's just pretty simple. It's regenvillages.com, Gen short for regenerative, so regenvillages.com. It's easy to find me on LinkedIn, or my email is just james@regenvillages.com. Also, to just say to the community of the next generation of family office folks, people who are now your age and younger, coming into this new wealth, that this is an opportunity to create the future of living on Earth through this kind of investment vehicle. And so we're really looking forward to welcoming in those kinds of conversations. And also someday I look forward to meeting Greta and having her also say, hey, this is the right way forward. Because she certainly has captivated the imagination and the spirit and the enthusiasm of a lot of these folks that we're also interested in speaking with. So I'm grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful for being able to just share our story and where we're going, and that this is a journey that requires a planetary engagement. So we look for folks all around the world who want to join us.
Thank you for that. And I'm super grateful as well for this conversation today. And I look forward to sharing it with the listeners.
Perfect. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
And enjoy your day over there.
Take care.
That's it for today. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. And if you want to read up more about the guest, then you can go to the show notes to get all of the links. And also, if you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter to never miss the latest episode. Thank you for today. See you in the next episode.